Okay, let's unpack this. We've got this stack of material here, and it claims to be, well, something pretty extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
The first-hand account of an Army nurse back in 47, supposedly communicating with an alien being from the Roswell crash.
It's the core of it, yeah. It's presented as a letter, plus these really detailed notes from a Mrs. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, an Army Air Force nurse.
Right.
And she's claiming these documents are the record of her telepathic interviews with this being they recovered.
So the setting is Roswell, 1947. There's a crash, the military descends, and then suddenly this one person, Matilda, becomes this unexpected communicator.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is really just to pull out the most compelling insights from these specific documents, the ones Mrs. McElroy provided.
We're focusing only on the story within these pages.
Precisely. We want to understand the claims it makes about Earth's hidden history, reality itself, even humanity, according to this source.
So we're here to understand this particular narrative. We're not trying to prove it right or wrong.
Not at all. Just exploring what it says about the universe, about Earth, and, well, about us.
Okay, so let's start with the source herself, Matilda O'Donnell McElroy. Who was she, according to this letter? And why release this, 60 years later?
Well, according to her own account, she was an Army nurse with the 509th Bomb Group, that's the unit tied to Roswell.
Okay.
She claims she sent these documents when she was 83. She felt this intense sense of responsibility, couldn't take the secret with her, basically.
A heavy burden to carry, you'd imagine.
Definitely. She writes about a personal hell of ethical irresolution and spiritual ambivalence carrying it since 47, and she believed the person she sent it to might actually understand it.
And she typed it all up on an old Underwood typewriter.
Yeah, she mentions that specifically. Kind of a quaint detail, isn't it, for such potentially cosmic information.
A real contrast. So how does an Army nurse end up being the only communicator with an alien?
Well, the documents claim she was assigned the role simply because she was the only one there who could understand the being who she calls Airl telepathically.
Just her. They brought in others, didn't they? Psychics and whatnot.
Apparently, yes. Psychologists, psychics, language experts. None of them could establish that connection. Only Matilda.
So it wasn't spoken language, it was like mind to mind.
Exactly. Purely telepathic is how it's described. At first, it was just images, feelings, impressions, kind of abstract.
Right.
Then, Airl apparently learned English sort of as a favor to Matilda, using words and symbols just to help focus their thoughts more precisely.
And Matilda got good at this.
She says by the 15th day or so, it felt completely fluid, effortless for her, like a normal conversation, just silent.
And this whole time, the military is watching everything.
Oh, absolutely. She was permanently assigned as Airl's companion, her interviewer. They gave her lists of questions from military brass, non-military people, too.
So she was feeding questions.
Yeah, relaying them telepathically. She was even there during medical tests and exams. They promoted her to senior master sergeant, partly for security, partly for pay grade, she assumes.
But never alone.
Never alone. Always observed by what she called the gallery. Military guys, intel agents, other officials, always watching.
Did the gallery try to talk to Airl? Or ask questions through Matilda?
They did, and that's where, according to the transcript, things got tricky.
How so?
Airl would just stop communicating. If other officials were there trying to ask questions directly or even relaying through Matilda, she just shut down.
Why? Did she say why?
Airl apparently conveyed telepathically that she sensed their fear, their secret intentions, a lack of real trust or genuine curiosity. And Matilda herself writes that she felt that too. This atmosphere of mistrust, hidden agendas from the people running the show, it was a barrier.
Okay, let's get into some of those first alleged Q&As. What were the basics they tried to establish?
Right, the initial stuff was pretty straightforward. Is Airl injured? No. Need medical help? Food? Water? No. Special environment needed? No.
Biological? Human germ?
Nope. Claimed not to be a biological being. No risk of human germs.
Did her people know she was here?
Airl said not at this time, but that others would come looking for her. And when asked about weapons, described as very destructive.
And the crash itself. What was the explanation given?
An electrical discharge from the atmosphere. Apparently she was investigating burning clouds, radiation explosions, maybe atmospheric tests or something, and got caught in it.
And how did the ship fly? The source mentions mind control, right?
That's what Airl claimed, yeah. Mind responds to thought commands. She said their bodies, these doll bodies, and the spacecraft are linked through some kind of electrical nervous system, controlled by thought.
And they communicate the same way.
Mind thought, yes. That's how your people communicate.
And who was she? Her identity?
She identified herself as an officer, a pilot, and an engineer, part of something called the Domain Expeditionary Force.
Blue Magna, okay.
Airl was her name, or identity. Said she served voluntarily, stationed at a space station in our asteroid belt.
Wow. And her self-description.
This is striking. As Matilda interpreted it, Airl described herself as Creator Mother Source.
Creator.mother.source.
Huh.
Okay. That definitely sets a different kind of stage.
Yeah.
So we have the crash, the communication basics, but then the source says Airl starts teaching Matilda.
Exactly. After a few weeks, apparently, Airl had scanned and absorbed tons of Earth material. Matilda brought her books, reports, magazines, you name it.
Scanned it. How?
Yeah.
Telepathically.
Presumably, yeah. The source implies a very rapid assimilation of information, and then the dynamic shifts. Airl starts providing the lessons.
And the first lesson is time. That seems fundamental.
It is, and Airl's perspective, as presented, is that time is basically arbitrary.
Arbitrary. How?
Not like, a fixed thing flowing equally for everyone. It's a measurement of motion perceived from the viewpoint of what she calls an ISB.
ISB.
Immortal Spiritual Being. That's the core concept.
Okay, so time depends on the ISB's perspective.
Right. It's not strictly linear, it's subjective. Events can happen interactively, concurrently, like organs in a body all working at once, not one after the other.
Any other way to perceive it?
She also mentioned it can be sensed by an ISB as a kind of uniform vibration throughout the physical universe. But the key takeaway is time isn't objective, it's tied to consciousness.
All right, so let's define these ISBs then. Immortal spiritual beings. What are they, according to Airl?
This is absolutely central to the whole narrative. ISBs, she claims, existed before the physical universe.
Before the Big Bang.
Before any physical universe, apparently. They aren't born, they can't die. They exist in a state described as a personally postulated perception of is-will-be.
Okay. Personally postulated perception of is-will-be. What does that even mean?
It's cryptic, yeah. But reading between the lines, it seems to suggest beings whose reality is shaped by their own thought, their own will, their imagination, like reality creators.
They're all unique.
Unique in identity, power, awareness, ability. Totally immaterial in their natural state. No location in space or time.
So they can travel instantly.
Span vast distances instantly, yes. Experience things without physical senses. Even choose not to feel pain. And their memory. Airl claimed ISBs can remember trillions of years of existence.
Trillions. Wow. And Airl herself is an ISB using this doll body.
Exactly. She claimed she could pop in and out of it at will, perceive right through walls, communicate telepathically. This whole ISB idea is the bedrock of everything else she talks about.
So where did our physical universe come from in this view?
Airl's explanation is that it formed from, basically colliding universes. Lots of individual universes created by different ISBs or groups of ISBs apparently merged or amalgamated.
And solidified.
Into the shared, mutually created physical universe we experience. And because energy and forms created by ISBs aren't destroyed, the universe just keeps expanding.
What was there before this physical universe?
She described a realm of magic illusions, basically realities woven purely from thought by ISBs.
So why would these incredibly powerful non-physical beings bother entering a physical universe like ours?
A few reasons given in the source. Some apparently lost their home illusion universes when the physical one expanded and sort of overwhelmed them. Others maybe joined forces to create things within the physical universe, or maybe even to conquer parts of it. But the really crucial point for Earth is that the ISBs currently on Earth, according to Airl, have had their memories completely wiped. They don't know their ISBs.
Amnesia.
Total amnesia. And their arrival times here, all over the map. She mentions periods like 60 trillion years ago, 3 trillion, and much, much more recently.
And the domain, Airl's civilization. How old are they supposed to be?
The source paints them as incredibly ancient. Developed space travel about 80 trillion years ago. Been doing galaxy surveys periodically ever since.
80 trillion. It just dwarfs everything we think of as history.
Completely. It sets a scale that's almost impossible to really comprehend.
Okay, so that's the cosmic backdrop. Mind-bending stuff.
Yeah.
Now let's bring it down to Earth, because the history presented here, it's completely different. When did the domain first get involved in our neighborhood, the Milky Way?
According to Airl, relatively recently in their terms, only about 10,000 years ago.
10,000 years, and their first move.
was to conquer the home planets of what she calls the Old Empire. These were apparently located in stars around the tail of the Big Dipper.
The Old Empire. Okay, remember that name. Then they set up shop.
Started setting up bases about 1,500 years after that initial conquest, including, allegedly, one right here on Earth.
A domain base on Earth. Where?
In the Himalayas. Established about 8,200 years ago, according to the transcript. A whole battalion, about 3,000 ISBs.
Hidden.
Hidden inside a mountain, yeah. Protected by some kind of electronic illusion or force screen. Cloaked, basically.
Something went wrong. I remember the outline mentioning it was destroyed.
Terribly wrong. The source claims that base was attacked and completely wiped out by a remnant force of that same old empire.
Where did the Old Empire attack from?
Get this, a hidden underground base on Mars. Apparently it had been there for a very long time.
On Mars. Wow. And the domain ISBs from the Himalayan base, what happened to them?
They were captured. And according to Airl, they suffered the exact same fate as all the other ISBs the old empire processed for Earth. Amnesia. Wiped clean. Given false memories, hypnotic commands, and then basically dumped onto Earth to inhabit human bodies.
And they're still here, mixed in with everyone else.
That's the claim. That these specific 3,000 souls are part of the human population today, unaware. Members of the domain's lost battalion, living human lives. It's a key part of the narrative.
So after losing their base and personnel, the domain investigated.
Massively. That's when they supposedly discovered the true scale of the old empire's operation in this part of the galaxy, a vast hidden network running for millions of years.
Sounds like a war was going on in our solar system.
Pretty much. Airl described ongoing battles between domain and old empire forces right here. This apparently went on until about 1235 AD.
What happened then?
The domain finally destroyed the last known old empire ship operating in this area, cleared them out, militarily speaking.
But their influence wasn't totally gone. The source mentions 1914.
Right. A bizarre incident, according to Airl. A domain officer in ISB apparently took over the body of Archduke Ferdinand of Austria for reconnaissance.
The Archduke, whose assassination started World War I.
The very same. When he was assassinated, the domain ISB was jolted out of the body and flew right through something called an amnesia force screen. Got captured by old empire remnants.
Okay, this amnesia force screen sounds absolutely crucial to the whole prison planet idea.
Yeah.
How does Airl describe it?
As a massive electronic field. It basically blankets this whole area of space, monitoring for ISBs trying to leave.
And if it catches one?
It zaps them. Severe brainwashing electronic shock, Airl specifically compares it to psychiatric electroshock therapy on Earth. The goal is to erase memory, erase personality, make the ISB totally compliant.
So Earth is a prison planet. That's the core claim.
That is exactly what Airl states. The old empire, she says, used Earth as a dumping ground. For ISBs, they deemed untouchable. From all over this galaxy, even other galaxies.
Untouchable? Who qualified? Just criminal.
Oh, it's way broader than that, according to the list in the source. Yes, criminals, political non-conformists, revolutionaries, anyone with a bad military record against the old empire. Artists, painters, singers, musicians, writers, actors, intellectuals, inventors, geniuses, skilled managers. Basically, anyone creative, independent, or unwilling to submit to what the source calls mindless economic, political, and religious servitude.
So the vibrant, chaotic mix of humanity on Earth. That's the result of this.
That's the explanation given, yes. All these different kinds of beings, stripped of their memories, dumped together. Airl claims that's why Earth has such an extremely unusual mix of races, cultures, languages, moral codes, religious, and political influences. Unlike, she says, a normal planet, which usually just has one type of humanoid.
But wait, you said the old empire government was destroyed centuries ago. How is this prison system still running?
Good question. Airl explains that while the central government was gone by around 850 BCE and their local forces cleared by 1230 AD, the amnesia machinery itself, it's still out there. Automated, hidden, still functioning in undiscovered locations. So even without the old empire officially running it, the system persists. And apparently others can now use it too, dumping their unwanted ISBs here. It's become a sort of galactic Siberia running on autopilot.
And Matilda caught up in all this back in 47. She started to understand why Airl wouldn't talk to the officials.
Yes. During her own interrogations, she realized Airl wasn't being hostile. Airl could just sense the fear and the secret intentions from the gallery. Their desire wasn't understanding, it was control, maybe dissection.
So Matilda came to distrust them too.
She did. She understood the communication barrier wasn't Airl, it was the environment the authorities created.
Okay, so The big picture claim from this part is just staggering. Earth as a prison, amnesiac souls, hidden tech, psychological warfare keeping everyone trapped. Let's move to part 4 in the source, ancient civilizations and control mechanisms. This old empire stuff seems to run deep.
It does. Airl apparently observed, or the domain did, the resurgence of science and culture in the West starting around 1150 AD. The end of the Dark Ages.
And they link that to the old empire's defeat here.
Yes. The claim is that destroying the old empire fleet remnants in this area slightly weakened the influence of the amnesia screens locally, allowed some suppressed knowledge to surface.
Like Isaac Newton. The source mentions him.
Exactly. He's cited as a prime example. An ISB suddenly remembering or reaccessing vast amounts of scientific knowledge incredibly quickly in one lifetime. Faster than normal discovery would allow, suggesting it was knowledge they already had before the amnesia.
But this didn't apply to everything. Humanity's stagnated.
That's the contrast Airl drew. Science surged, but in humanities, she claimed ISBs kept behaving badly, influenced by those hypnotic commands between lives, plus the chaotic mix of inmates. War and conflict, she stated, are actively promoted to keep everyone crippled and trapped, divided.
What about ancient civilizations? Atlantis, Lemuria, the pyramids? How does this account explain them?
Okay, 2 different groups, according to Airl. Atlantis and Lemuria, supposedly the source of Oriental races around 400,000 years ago, they were from another star system entirely. Vanished due to a polar shift. Different story.
And pyramid civilizations, Egypt, Maya, etc.
Those, she claimed, were set up by the old empire prison system. They weren't organic cultures that evolved here. They were prepackaged, imposed by a totalitarian hierarchy.
Prepackaged how? The source calls them mystery monuments.
Right. Their purpose wasn't really practical. It was psychological manipulation. Carefully contrived is the phrase used. Layers of lies mixed with just enough truth to be convincing. Sophisticated math and tech displayed alongside, like, theatrical metaphors and symbols.
All designed to
distract, divert attention from the real situation. Captured ISBs, amnesia, imprisonment, the priesthood in these societies. Their main job, according to Airl, was enforcing forgetfulness, preventing ISBs from remembering who they really are.
And religion itself.
Described pretty bluntly as mumbo-jumbo, doublespeak, a tool for control using force, fear, ignorance, promoting a false spirituality focused on the physical body, not the spirit within.
Even burial rituals, like mummification.
Another layer of the trap, Airl claimed. Burying the body with possessions reinforces the idea that you are your body, that physical things matter eternally, makes ISBs cling to the physical, forget their spiritual nature, and conveniently ensures they lose track of any possessions between lives.
Are there specific examples given, like archaeological sites?
Yes. She mentioned hydraulic mining near Lake Titicaca in the Andes around 15,000 BCE. Called it an old empire mining base, and there's massive stone structures you find there.
Like Pumapunku.
Airl claimed they were often hastily built props, false facades, not functional, just there to create an illusion of deep mystery and ancient power and the divine rulers of these places, just old empire operatives, not gods.
So old empire gone by 1230 AD here, but the effects linger. Did others move in to exploit Earth after that?
That's the claim. With the old empire police gone, this sector became a bit of a free-for-all. Renegades, space pirates, miners, merchants, all supposedly came here to exploit the situation and the trapped population.
The source mentions the Nephilim from Genesis.
Yeah, interprets them as possibly ISBs in bodies, maybe showing up to steal resources or even run illicit operations like drug smuggling. Ezekiel's biblical vision of wheels within wheels, described as an old empire scout craft.
Even Yahweh gets mentioned.
Just a brief note, claiming Yahweh supposedly designed human bodies for only 120 years lifespan, which Airl notes is shorter than typical for similar planets, implying maybe another control mechanism.
Did the domain ever try to intervene to help the trapped ISB?
There was apparently an attempt between 1500 and 1200 BCE. The domain tried to teach the core concept that everyone is an individual immortal spiritual being.
How did that go?
According to Airl, it got twisted. Perverted by old empire priests and the ongoing amnesia operation into the idea of only one ISB, monotheism. Moses is mentioned in this context.
So monotheism as a perversion of the original truth.
In this narrative, yes. On the other hand, the Vedic hymns, supposedly brought by the Lost Battalion ISBs before capture, are credited as the source for Eastern religions, Buddhism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, which the source claims were an improvement over earlier, more brutal idolatry.
What about things like the Oracle at Delphi?
Reinterpreted too, the serpent Python, An old empire, ISB technology, or entity disabled, conquered by a domain operative, Apollo. The temple built on the grave of another god, a euphemism for the domain taking down an old empire installation.
It connects historical figures, too. Cyrus the Great.
Identified as the commanding officer of that lost battalion, who somehow managed to incarnate as Cyrus around 559 BCE, used his innate organizing ability, and possibly other battalion members recognizing him subconsciously, to build his empire.
And the domain was searching for them.
Yes, a large search party, 900 officers, land, sea, space forces, using electronic detectors called the Tree of Life to try and pinpoint their lost ISBs on Earth.
Teotihuacan in Mexico. The city with the pyramids.
Described as a late remnant around 200 BCE. Its layout, mirroring the solar system, suggests outside knowledge. The snake dragon imagery common there, claimed to be old empire propaganda, making people think gods are reptilian, to distract from the fact that gods are just powerful ISBs.
Any later examples of control mentioned?
Briefly, yes. Hassani Saba and the Hashashin assassins in the Middle Ages presented as priesthood control through terror, and the Knights Templar around 1300 AD.
The Templars. What's the claim there?
That they stumbled upon an old empire treasury, used the wealth to kickstart Swiss banking, and then deliberately promoted and financed wars to keep the ISB population divided, fearful, and unable to cooperate or remember. War as a control mechanism.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So the takeaway from this section is that pretty much all of recorded history, religion, finance, conflict, it's all potentially part of this massive hidden control system designed to keep ISBs imprisoned on Earth. Let's shift to part 5. Biology and bodies. Traps of flesh, the source calls them.
Yeah, Airl was apparently scathing about Earth biology textbooks, called them wildly inaccurate.
Why inaccurate?
Based on false memories implanted by the amnesia system, poor observation, missing data, unproven theories, even superstition, citing things like historical bloodletting.
And the biggest mistake Earth science makes, according to her.
Completely ignoring the ISB, the fact that there's a spiritual being, an energy source, an intelligence animating the life form, that's the fundamental blind spot.
So the origin of life. Earth science has it wrong.
According to this source, yes. And the true information about where biological entities actually come from has been deliberately erased from the minds of ISDs here, to stop them remembering.
What about evolution? Darwin. Natural selection.
Airl dismisses accidental evolution. Claims it requires technology and deliberate supervision by ISBs. Modifying animals is given as a simpler example.
So humans didn't evolve from apes.
That specific idea is called a hypnotic lie from the amnesia operation. Airl stated that humanoid bodies, like ours, have existed across the universe for trillions of years. They aren't a recent Earth invention.
But the Vedas mention evolution.
They do, but Airl claimed those were sort of unauthorized stories based on fragments of real knowledge that got misinterpreted as rigid dogma here on Earth.
Did Airl have personal experience with biology?
She claims she did. Billions of years ago, she said she worked as a biological engineer for a company called the Arcadia Regeneration Company, manufacturing and supplying life forms to planets.
A company making life forms?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a hierarchy related to bodies?
Yes, a pretty rigid class system used by both the old empire and the domain, based on what kind of body, if any, an ISB uses.
What are the levels?
Top are the free ISBs, no bodies needed. Then limited ISBs maybe use bodies sometimes. Then the dull body classes.
Like Airl's?
Right. Lightweight, durable, good for space travel, specialized, have rank insignia. She mentions junior officers used partial biological bodies, less durable. Below that, the soldier class, often using robot or heavily armed mechanical bodies.
And at the bottom?
The lower classes, who use flesh bodies, like humans.
And these flesh bodies have serious limitations.
Loads of them, according to Airl. Can't handle space travel, too fragile. Logistically, a nightmare: food, waste, sleep, air pressure, temperature limits. Militarily useless, vaporize easily. And the lifespan, incredibly short. 60 to 150 years, maybe.
The biggest limitation being?
ISBs stuck in flesh bodies lose a huge amount of their native power and awareness. They're significantly downgraded.
How did these powerful ISBs get stuck in these limiting bodies in the first place? Seems counterintuitive.
Airl claimed it started as a kind of fad, believe it or not, around 74 trillion years ago. ISBs started using bodies just for kicks, for amusement, to experience physical sensations.
Okay, and then what?
tricks got introduced. Maybe the bodies were deliberately made more fragile.
Yeah.
ISBs, being naturally powerful, would accidentally damage them. Then they'd feel bad about it, guilty, remorseful.
And that led to?
They'd hold back their power next time, try to be more careful, became more dependent on the body's limited senses, less reliant on their own abilities, got drawn further in, until, snap, trapped. This apparently led to widespread enslavement over unimaginable spans of time.
So our bodies aren't just vehicles, they're traps. And our understanding of life is deliberately flawed. That's the essence here. Let's go to the final part. Part 6, science, survival, and maybe some hope. Escape.
Yeah, the source sort of muses on what Earth science could be like if geniuses like Newton or Tesla hadn't lost their memories, if they'd had trillions of years of continuous work behind them.
Contrasting with the domain.
Right. The domain is presented as a civilization built on that kind of uninterrupted progress.
And creation itself, how is that defined? Not like physics describes it, I assume.
No. Airl claimed the actual fabric of the universe, space, energy, matter, was originally created by ISB thought. Illusions, inventions made real. Every particle starts as an idea.
So creation is the creator, the ISB.
Your essence, yes. Which leads to her critique of Earth science and religion.
How so?
Science, she says, focuses only on the results matter. Energy ignoring the ISB creator spark. It's a religion of matter. Religion, conversely, often focuses only on the creator, sometimes dismissing or denigrating the creation.
Both are incomplete.
Both are like bars of a prison cell, she claims. They prevent seeing the whole picture, the ISB and its creations, as interconnected.
So the prison isn't just the amnesia screens, it's mental.
Very much so. The source argues the study of spirit of the ISB self is deliberately booby-trapped on Earth, tied up in religious superstition or forbidden by science because it's not physically measurable.
And this ignorance is the real trap.
Leads to imprisonment until self-destruction, Airl warns. The prison is made of shadows in your mind. Lies, pain, loss, fear, all stemming from forgetting your true nature.
Who are the true geniuses, then, in this context?
Not necessarily the scientists or artists as we think of them. The true geniuses, Airl says, are those who help other ISBs recover their memory, their self-awareness, their determination.
That's the solution, not better rules or tech.
No. The solution isn't external control, moral codes, laws, faith, drugs, weapons, even shock therapy or hypnosis. Those are often part of the control system. Real freedom comes from within, from remembering.
And Earth's survival depends on this.
Entirely, according to Airl. ISBs here need to recover the skills, abilities, and identities they've lost over trillions of years. The problem is, the tech, or knowledge for doing that, didn't exist in the old empire. They caused the amnesia. And the domain didn't need it until they lost people here. So as of 1947...
The domain didn't have a solution either?
Not a complete one, no. Not yet.
But wait. The source says domain officers have helped Earth. Tesla was mentioned.
Right. Some off-duty officers apparently take huge risks, inhabiting Earth bodies temporarily to slip some technology or knowledge through. Tesla is given as an example. Airl herself said her own intention in talking to Matilda was partly to help advance Earth's science and humanities.
Why, if it wasn't her mission?
Because, she noted, you need advanced tech and a reasonably stable society to even begin the kind of research needed for ISBs to figure out how to escape the trap.
What kind of tech does the domain have? She described it.
Some glimpses, yeah. Instantly locating things or beings anywhere, modifying planets, stars. Instant space travel. Earth tech is called primitive by comparison. Their ships use thought control, light energy.
Did she explain how?
She gave some principles. Controlling atoms, energy, space, time directly with consciousness with thought. Very advanced concepts.
And she offered some info as a gift.
Yes. Principles for Earth engineers how to locate and identify individual atoms, rearrange their structure, create and channel light energy. Hoping it would help, basically. Serve the greater good.
The source also mentions boredom as a problem for immortal beings.
Yeah, it's an interesting philosophical point. ISBs are eternal, powerful, potentially all-knowing. What do you do for eternity? You create illusions, challenges, games to avoid soul-crushing boredom.
Games need obstacles.
Exactly. Unknowns, barriers, opponents. The problem arose, Airl suggests, when ISBs deliberately limited their own abilities to make the games more interesting and then forgot they were just pretending. Forgot they set up the limitations.
The analogy used was...
create cage, lock self in, throw away key, forget. A self-imposed prison, ultimately.
And Earth propaganda reinforces this. How?
By teaching people that external forces, gods, fate, governments, whatever, are responsible for everything. It encourages assigning responsibility away from the self.
So people don't realize their own power.
Exactly. Airl states that as long as no human accepts responsibility for being essentially a god, the creator, the source of their own reality, they remain trapped, waiting for someone else to save them.
Okay, shifting gears. Airl had to leave, right? The source mentions her departure.
Yes. She told Matilda she needed to return to her asteroid base. She'd be departing her doll body, which was damaged in the crash anyway, within 24 hours.
And her body was beyond our science.
Simple tech for the domain, she said, but vastly beyond 1947 Earth analysis. She also mentioned the junior officers, whose bodies were less durable, partial biologicals, had already left or been recovered.
What about the domain's future plans for Earth? Are they going to clean up the old Empire mess?
Eventually, yes, destroy the remnants. But it wasn't their main mission then. The amnesia screens. They can be destroyed, but it's hard. Their extent is unknown. Also not the domain's current priority.
But destroying them might help people remember.
It might allow memories to resurface between lives, yeah. Because the memories aren't truly erased, just suppressed by the shock and hypnosis each time.
And the domain considers Earth their territory now.
Yes, they've annexed this whole sector. Earth is their possession. The moon, the asteroid belt, those are permanent domain bases. Any interference would be stopped. Their own expansion plans are ongoing, more traffic towards the Galactic Center over the next 5,000 years.
So what's the bottom line for humanity's future, according to Airl?
It's pretty stark. Option 1, humans need to cooperate, find solutions, somehow rise above being just human bodies. They need to rediscover that they are ISBs, remember who they are individually, and transcend the biological trap.
Realization equals escape.
That's the only path to escape given. Otherwise, Airl says there's basically no future for the population here. They'll just keep getting recycled.
And the old empire influence is still subtly active.
Through covert thought control, yes. Manifesting as sudden, inexplicable behavior. Pearl Harbor is given as a specific, recent, for 1947 example.
Pearl Harbor.
How? The claim is that illogical orders, ships packed in port, ammo locked away, officers partying right before came from someone in authority, implying old empire manipulation behind the scenes.
So ISBs just keep getting recycled through the amnesia graph.
Lifetime after lifetime. Some here recently, some since Lemuria, allegedly. Trapped indefinitely unless they break the cycle and free themselves.
Does the domain want to rescue all of them? Or just their own?
Their main concern mentioned is their own 3,000 lost battalion members still captive here. It's a difficult problem they hadn't solved back then. Rescue wasn't the priority.
Now, there's a postscript from Matilda written much later, like 40 years later, claiming she stayed in touch.
That's right, a really fascinating addition. She claims she maintained telepathic contact with Airl, and through that, she realized she herself is one of those 3,000 lost battalion ISBs.
How'd they find them all?
She mentions a domain Anunnaki mission, using a device called the Tree of Life, that located all the lost members scattered across Earth. Matilda says she recovered some memories, mostly of past lives as a nurse, and came to understand eternity isn't just behind us, it's, in the future, something to be reclaimed.
And this leads to the inside job idea.
Exactly. She understands that even knowing this, she's still technically in prison, still scheduled for recycling after that life. The domain, she says, can't just swoop in and rescue everyone right now.
So escape has to come from Earth.
The inmates will have to figure out how to get themselves out, is the quote. It has to be an inside job. Self-liberation.
But there have been breakthroughs in memory recovery.
She mentions some. Agama Siddhartha, the Buddha, apparently made a huge leap, but his original teachings got distorted by priests later. More recently, though.
Yes.
A major advance by an unnamed engineer and his wife on Earth. Both, Airl supposedly revealed, were former high-ranking old Empire officers who became untouchable and got dumped here.
And they discovered
Methods for ISBs to safely recover their memories and abilities. Codified techniques.
It's something even more startling about multiple bodies.
This is maybe the wildest claim in the postscript. This couple allegedly discovered that a single ISB can occupy and operate multiple biological bodies at the same time, concurrently.
Seriously.
Examples. Matilda provides examples attributed to Airl. The engineer ISB was simultaneously Sultan Suleiman, the Magnificent, and Cecil Rhodes. His wife ISB was simultaneously a harem girl who became Ottoman Empress and Queen Elizabeth I and a Polish princess.
What? How?
Other examples given. The competing inventors of the Bessemer steel process, Kelly and Bessemer, were one ISB. The telephone inventors, Bell, Gray, others, one ISB working through multiple bodies to accelerate the complex invention process.
That changes everything, if true. And this relates to the Lost Battalion.
Yes. Because of these alleged breakthroughs, memory recovery, operating out of body, some of the Lost Battalion members can now apparently return to limited, part-time duty while their Earth bodies sleep.
Doing what?
She gives the example of two girls on Earth who work shifts as communication operators on the Domain's asteroid base in their sleep. Matilda herself claims she does this too.
Okay. And the final reason Matilda gives for releasing all this, after keeping it secret for decades.
Simply to make other ISBs on Earth aware. To wake them up to their alleged situation. She knows most won't believe it too incredible, she writes, for someone whose memory is wiped.
But they have to confront it.
Yes. Because the biggest weapon keeping them trapped, according to this narrative, is ignorance, disbelief, secrecy. Reinforced, she adds, by governments classifying things like Roswell.
And Airl's final message via Matilda.
Just a sincere wish, apparently, that the eternal future for all the ISBs trapped here might be as pleasant as possible.
Okay, so we've just done a deep dive into, well, a truly mind-bending account. Alleged secret transcripts from 1947 painting a picture of reality that turns everything upside down.
Yeah, we've covered the core claims presented in this specific source. Earth as a prison planet, run by ancient, hidden forces. Humanity composed of amnesiac immortal spiritual beings trapped in bodies. A manipulated history. And this astonishing idea of a forgotten past and a potential difficult path to escape through regaining memory and awareness.
It's an absolutely incredible story. And just to reiterate, we've presented the narrative as laid out in this source material. We've explored this story, taken it face value for the purpose of understanding what it claims.
Exactly. And what's really interesting, tying it back to the source's own internal logic, it repeatedly states that ignorance is the primary weapon used to keep ISBs trapped here. Knowledge, memory, awareness, that's supposedly the key to freedom.
Which brings up a final thought, really, for you listening. If the fundamental problem described in this account is forgetting who you are, where you came from, if the prison is built on ignorance and disbelief, then just simply knowing about this narrative, however unbelievable or outlandish it might seem, does that knowledge itself represent the very first potential step towards regaining the control, the self-awareness, and maybe even achieving the kind of freedom this extraordinary source describes?